Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are launching the show's inaugural Minisode series. The purpose of the series is to support those of us thinking about or just getting started with our business idea. The series also offers encouragement to those of us growing and scaling our enterprises. So this series differs from our normal weekly episodes. On the regular show, I interview business owners sharing their wisdom and guidance with me. And if you love these interviews, fear not, because they will continue on this platform every other Tuesday. In between these episodes, the Minisode series is going to air. And at this point, you might be wondering, what the heck is a Minisode? And how is this any different from the regular Out Entrepreneur episodes? Both are outstanding questions, and my definition of a minisode is simply an episode of the podcast that dives a little bit deeper into some of the many themes guests over the past 2+ years have shared. Some of these themes piqued my curiosity and have inspired me to excavate wisdom and strategies to support you on the path of building thriving businesses. To make the content a bit more engaging, my faithful sound engineer and non-binary pod to the people business owner, Allon Bealesoli, will be interviewing me, giving me an opportunity to reflect back all that I continue to learn from amazing outbosses featured on past episodes of the show. So together, it's our goal to amplify the wisdom of so many LGBTQ entrepreneurs who have shared and delivered the best business advice centered around leveraging our rainbow superpowers. So with that, Allon, are you ready to inspire fellow outbosses?
I am so ready.
How long have you been waiting to say that?
I think it's been a year.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. So I love that someone who's so integral to the show is able just to be present and for us just to have some conversations about so many things that pop up where, it's just, there's so much that we can talk about with just a little piece of what guests share. And, we only have an hour to really explore some of those concepts. So let's just dive into it and figure out, at least around business ideas.
Sure. This is great for me because I'm always the silent one in the room, right?
Yeah. But you're not, you're silent, but there are all of these nonverbals. So for anyone who's listening, it's like a guest will say something incredible and Allon's like, yes, and doing a fist pump, or, I'll be responding to something and I can tell he wants to add, and it's just I wish he could. So this is the space where we're going to do it.
Right on. Thank you. And it's my honor, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's mine. Yeah. I think this is going to be fun.
Right. So on this week's inaugural episode, we are going to explore how to come up with a great business idea. And rather than talking in abstract, we will explore how Rhodes got started with his consulting firm.
Cool. Yeah.
And so go ahead and tell us a little bit more about how you came up with your business idea, if you would.
Sure. For me, I think in building a really strong business foundation, you have to solve an ideal client's most vexing problems. So this is a problem that is so complex and cumbersome that someone's going to be willing to make the investment to get the solutions they need from you, and really appreciating your perspective and the experience that you bring into the workplace. So for me, I think most folks who tune into this show on the regular know that I'm in the diversity, equity, and inclusion field. And for some of the folks who tune in, you're also in that field too, which is great. And those of us who are in the field, we know that there's lots of tactical approaches to building inclusive environments. So oftentimes people will come to me and say, hey, Rhodes, can you do a training on unconscious bias? And it's this one and done. People think that tactical approach is going to solve their cultural problems and they're going to be on to greener pastures and everyone's going to be happy in the workplace. So very few people who approach me with that recognize that to do diversity, equity, and inclusion really well, they recognize that it's an organizational competency and that it's something that is vital to an organization, and the work is ongoing. It requires a commitment, and it's not something that's static. So for me, in getting started in my business, I knew I wanted to do something that would impact the culture of so many organizations and really help people show up at work knowing that they belong, especially if they're from LGBT communities, they're people of color, women, anyone who is in a workplace where they're underrepresented and there's a dominant culture and they're not a part of it. So they feel some kind of otherness. And what I wanted to do was really check in with those decision makers who make the investments on any kind of culture change or change management solutions in their organization, to ask them what is most difficult for them in shifting culture. And what I found is by just having conversations with these different CEOs, most were really struggling with not knowing where to get started with the work. They either didn't know how to get started, they knew enough to be dangerous, but like they didn't know how to manage the work, or they were at a place where they just didn't know how to implement and sustain their commitments. And I think I was really fortunate to be able to be in contact with different leaders to kind of just interview. Like I did probably 12 to 24 interviews with different thought leaders or different organizational leaders. And through the note taking that I took, I just saw these kind of common themes. And then for me, with my business idea, knowing that I wanted to be in this space, I looked at my past experience to say, what could I contribute to disrupt these kind of feelings of not knowing how to get started with the work or how to sustain it? And most of my expertise comes from doing kind of system redesign, looking at budgets and operations, and kind of aligning that to strategic goals. And the thing that I saw in this space is that at least the leaders that I was talking to, they weren't thinking strategically about this work. They were thinking about this work as professional development or something only HR needed to worry about. And the more conversations I had around, how are you building how are you building your commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion into your strategic plans, strategic goals broadly? And how are you directing funding to fund positions and program dollars to make these kind of changes? And I don't know, 9 times out of 10, most of these leaders were like, we're not doing that now, or we would like to do that, but the people who are in control of our budget don't understand the value of doing this work. And so that's where I saw the opportunity. I really just wanted to leverage my experience to help out those folks. So I think in terms of coming up with a business idea, rather than an aspiring entrepreneur thinking about, okay, I have a solution to a problem I think people have, it's better to ask the people that you want to work with, like identify your ideal candidate and then start talking with them. What is your biggest challenge? What would you be willing to invest in to solve that problem? What kind of solutions do you think would be helpful? That's where you're going to get, the more conversations you have around that of being curious and being willing to ask those questions, the closer you're going to get to having a really solid foundation for a business that you're going to love. You're going to be in a place, an environment where you love doing what you love. And hopefully you're also delivering something, whether it's a product or service, that's helping a massive amount of people. I mean, I feel like that's the sweet spot of we talk on the show all the time of finding your authentic voice and being your authentic self at work. And I think this is a big component of it.
That's cool. So you took what you knew and brought your passion along with it.
Totally.
And saw how you could affect other people, but still in a business model.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Those kind of 3 things that I just shared with you, I was listening to an interview this morning, and it was an interview with Diane Sawyer, and she was talking about her father. And she said, he was a farmer from kind of rural Kentucky, and he had 3 things that he lived by. He was like, find something that you love and do it. Live in a space where you can have the greatest amount of adventure doing what you love, and make sure that you're positively impacting people. Like the thing that you do that you love in the place that you love doing it is helping the most amount of people. And I'm like, whoa, those are it's so simple to remember. And I think it's so in alignment with this idea of living your authentic life. And yeah.
No, awesome.
It's pretty cool.
And then you mentioned that to build the foundation of a solid business, you have to be really clear on understanding what your customers' pain points are. How do you identify those pain points in an effective manner?
Yeah. So this also comes from, so some folks know Tony Robbins. I'm sure, big kind of personal development. And the thing that he often says is, if you're in a place where you want to change something about your life, like in this instance, you want to start a business, start asking better questions. So if you're trying to identify pain points, first of all, you want to identify who are the people that you really want to work with. So get clear about, for me, I wanted to work with purpose-driven business owners that wanted to intentionally create cultures of inclusion, right? So where the heck can I find those people, right? So for anyone who's tuning in, you're just getting started in your business, get really clear on who do you love working with, and kind of just brainstorm until you can hone it in to a couple of audiences, ideally maybe 1 to start with. And then be brave enough and reach out to some of those people and ask them, what is the number one problem keeping you awake at night? And then if they're vulnerable enough to share with you, to be honest, because you have to build the trust and rapport to get an honest response, you ask them, of that problem, what's great about it, right? And that might kind of shock them because it's a problem that they want to go away. But if they can find out some opportunity within the problem, then that can get them to start to think about what's not perfect right now because of that problem. These are the questions, what are you willing to do to make the problem go away and to make your organization kind of continue moving forward? Or if you're serving an individual customer, if you were able to solve that problem, what would they be willing to do? If they want to pay money for it or if it requires some work, you have to get them clear on what they're willing to do and then what they're no longer willing to do to make it the way that they want. And then the last piece is just to ask those folks, how can you do what's necessary to make it the way that you want? Usually when people are thinking about their problem, they just want to immediately go to the how to fix it,
Right.
And kind of walking people through that framework can allow them to see some of the advantages because of the problem. And that will be harder to get clear around, but then also identifying what they're willing to do to make it go away, So
that's cool.
Yeah.
And then, so go ahead and tell me more, if you can, about how you find your ideal clients or customers. What if you don't know how to define them or who they are? So where do you start?
Okay. So if you don't know where to find your ideal clients or customers, it again goes back to asking better questions. So oftentimes, when I'm talking with folks, and usually it's people who tune into the podcast and they want to get started in business, or maybe they've already started their businesses, folks will approach me and say, you know what, why can't I find any clients, or why can't I find my dream clients? I think in that question, I usually encourage people to reframe. So ask questions. What do I already know? Start getting curious about what you know. And who do you know that might have an interest in what you know, right? So it's kind of going back to what's your expertise? So in your instance, you know a ton about sound engineering. You know a ton about the beauty of the voice and the power of that. And kind of in your business, you started Pod to the People, right? So because you know so much about sound engineering, you know that there is an increase in people wanting to podcast. It's okay, that's you're starting to kind of get clear on your ideal customers. And that's what I would encourage people to do if you're listening to this show, is remember what you know, remember who you like to work with, and think about who's already within your networks where you can start to reintroduce yourself to say, hey, I'm really interested in starting this business. I know that I can help you. Let's talk together about what some of your bigger problems are and let's work around it. And then I think one of the other things that pops up for people is they get this kind of imposter syndrome of, I'm a young professional or have no work experience, right? So let's take an example of someone who's just getting out of high school, right? So someone who maybe they played on a sports team, right? So at some point, whether they were super competitive or not, they knew the importance of health. They knew the importance of exercise. And that's something that, in terms of businesses, in kind of different industries that seem to thrive, health is massive. So people either want to know how to have better nutrition, they want to have better habits around exercise. That high school athlete, in theory, could talk with a group of people that they could help and design some kind of business around health and well-being. I think the number one step is getting clear about what you know, and then getting clear about who you know that you might be able to help with what you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. I mean, does that, in terms of what you're doing in your business, does that resonate for you?
Yeah, it does. And there's a certain amount of flexibility that you have to find your clients as well. So I'm actually from a music background, my audio work.
Yeah.
But right now podcasts are hot and there's music is still around, but the industry has changed a lot. I had to be flexible in my ongoing business. So audio has been my business. Now I'm just tweaking it to make sure that I can keep going.
Yeah. And that's you're also introducing something that's important about flexibility is, your ideal clients, and they're still there, is working with musicians. And there's this whole space of podcasting, which has totally disrupted radio in the way that we know it, right? And, the really cool thing about what you're doing is that there are DJs out there that have started their own podcasts. There's a show that I listen to called The Sound of Freedom. And it's just a guy who wants to play more positive music. And so he basically, I don't know how he gets the rights to play the music, but I think it's kind of underground artists that he basically mixes a mix every time. And it has a different theme, but I love it because it's not listening to kind of commercial radio where you have the commercial after commercial after commercial, and then there may be a song every 10 minutes or something like that.
When they're advertising that we play 5 songs in a row.
I know, and you're like, wow, thank you. I could like pay for a subscription to Spotify, never have to hear your voice again. But so it's interesting. And then, there's a couple of local shows around here that just kind of, there's a story about a musician and they give kind of a profile and they play a couple of songs from that musician, so and you're kind of like, you're following the breadcrumbs of like, this is a big industry. I can use these skills and help so many people. And chances are, the more that people know about your background and as a musician, I think you're going to naturally attract other folks that want to talk about music in the podcast space, right?
Right. Or I'm hoping creative types in general as well.
Yeah. Creative entrepreneurs, right? People that have taken a non-traditional path and creating really cool artistic careers that are inspiring other people. This is a cool space to be in. So I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, and you're getting more and more clear about, these are my skills. This is a business I can start. And then, as you start working with more and more people, you'll kind of develop your own filter of like, I really love working with these folks talking about these topics, and this other stuff, it's kind of nice and it pays the bills, but ultimately I want to go in this direction. And I think that's also something that's really important as you're developing your business ideas, that sometimes you're starting a thing and it's good because it's helping you pay the bills, but you kind of just have to keep following the breadcrumbs, sometimes for a couple of years, until you look back and you're like, oh my God, this is my business. Like, why didn't I know that from the beginning? It's so obvious, but it's just...
But you couldn't.
You can't until you do the work. And I think for me, like in the work that I do, one of the best ways for me to get clear around what it is that I do and the value that I can deliver is, just showing up. I write every day. Like I try to write about 1,000 words. And so like folks who tune into the show know that I've written a book, but like beyond the book, it's just every day writing blogs or, writing articles for other newsletters or, publications. And that alone just clarifies what I do know. And it also shows me opportunities and new directions to take the work. So
your business is multifaceted, would you say then?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's, a lot, the lion's share of what pays the bills is definitely the consulting, this kind of like high touch consulting for big clients. There's also, there's the book writing, there's people who want to hear about the content of the book and will bring me in as a speaker to do workshops on content of the book and things like that. And then there's like these other kind of collaborative opportunities where there's content that I've written where people want to put that content into some kind of online learning platform, like a video course or something like that, where, I work with them to shape that content. We develop some kind of contract where every time they sell that product, I get a certain percentage of it. And if I share that content with my audience, we split it. It's just like there's all these different ways of joint ventures and, individual stuff that you can be doing in your business. I would just say, for the business idea, be curious. And as you get started in your business, stay open to opportunities that present themselves to you, because it's important to find your no on things that absolutely you don't want to do, but the things that you might not know that much about, talk with people who are a little bit further down on the path and consider those options before immediately saying no. But be clear and kind of having a process of considering every opportunity of like, is this in alignment with my values? Is it in alignment with where I want to take my business this year? If it's no to both of those, is this an unexpected opportunity that can, completely change the trajectory of what you want to do, but it gets you to your ultimate goal faster?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Who knows? Like as you're doing your business, you're working on podcasts, you're a musician at heart. Say you're working with someone who's a podcaster who is a musician and they're like, Allon, we love what you do. Join our band. We're taking a world tour. It's
right.
Like,
sure.
I don't know. You've done that before. So it's like, if you want to do it again, I don't know. It's the opportunities that come when you're open to it can sometimes surprise you and be bigger than you ever imagined.
We've talked about this on the podcast before, and podcasts are helpful in this way is be a good listener. So podcast is about listening as well. But I guess you have to just be a good listener, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think so. I think the art of active listening, I think we all can improve upon that just because we're in the land of distraction and being short on time, right? So I think actively listening both to yourself, we get woo on the show, right? But it's that intuition. Like if you feel something in your body, that's information that you have to also actively listen, even if it's not being outwardly communicated by someone else. Like trust that, number one, because that's going to guide you. And then actively listen to the people in front of you because they might be sharing things that are different than what you anticipated. And I think that goes back to the business idea, right? Like don't lead with being the knower, right? Don't lead with like, I have all this wisdom. And so these are the solutions I've prepackaged and now I'm selling it to you. And then don't be surprised if you take that tactic that you're not going to, your sales might not be what you imagined in your mind. You know, conversely, like if you're actively listening, you're asking questions to people that you would love to work with, that's where the information is. You know, that's where those opportunities are. And it's up to you to kind of synthesize that and then turn it into a solution that's responsive to what you've actively heard or listened to.
Right, that makes sense. And like, let people tell you what they need instead of you telling them what they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because then you are legitimately solving someone's problem because you've actively listened to them. You've considered what you know. You have that aha of like, duh, I've done this so many times. Like I can do this for this person. And because of your expertise and because of what they don't know, that's the connection, right? That's the business model, you know, or at least the business idea.
And it kind of ties in a little bit with empathy, which is something that comes up on the show a lot.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. Right. It's kind of being able to step in the shoes of someone else and close that gap, you know? So if you're talking to a prospective client or a customer, you're actively listening to them, you're trying to imagine the world from their perspective. And the cool thing is when you're in their shoes, you're bringing your knowledge with you to then kind of look at a 360 view of their world and being able to kind of immediately kind of filling those gaps to the problems, right, with the solutions. And then you come back into your own shoes and you're like, all right, I'm going back into the lab and I'm going to come up with some packaged solutions that are immediately responsive to that person's challenge. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And so now that people have a good framework of what to do and what to expect, how do they just get going with it?
Yeah. So, now that there's a little bit of a framework, and hopefully this has inspired a few thoughts for people early on in kind of getting your business started. And even for people that have a business, maybe you're thinking about starting a new business. That's great. I think this framework is very helpful, or reiterating, an old process. I think the next step is then look at your Rolodex, look at people who are in your network. They potentially could be those ideal customers. And I would highly recommend right now, if you have a piece of paper in front of you, or you can talk with Siri to take some notes, whatever, is generate a list of 10 people that you're going to talk to. and give yourself a deadline. I don't know, let's say 30 days, that you reach out to those 10 people, at least to say, hey, I would love to get on your calendar to talk about a potential business idea and or, maybe you don't want to lead with that. I would love to talk with you about what's going on in your work world. And with the goal of like really trying to hone in on what are some of their challenges related to the skills and experiences that you have. And, let's say 50% of those 10 people are like, absolutely, we love you. We're going to make time to chat. Try these questions out, try to ask them, what's kind of keeping you awake at night? What are you willing to invest in to make that problem go away? What are you willing to no longer put up with? And what are your ideas on how to solve it? And then have the conversation. But that's the framework of it. And be flexible enough to see where they take it. And I think that with that, there's going to be some magic. There's definitely going to be some things that you thought in your mind would come up in the conversation, and they might surprise you in terms of where the conversation takes you. So those are my best thoughts on it. And outside of talking with your ideal clients, I would also talk with people potentially in the industry that you are in or you would like to go in and get some mentorship that way. And we will for sure have a podcast minisode all about mentorship, sponsorship, how to get support. It might be 2 podcasts because I think the mentorship piece is one component of it. The other piece is what kind of groups or resources exist in your geographic location or at least online that you can get plugged into that could be super helpful. And for anyone who's still tuning in right now, this is really kind of an experiment for Allon and myself of doing these minisodes. So if there's something that's been mentioned on the podcast that you have found to be interesting or you just want to hear more on, you can email me for sure at the contact information that's in the show notes. You can also, on any kind of platform you listen to the podcast, I'm most honed in on iTunes, but you can leave a comment there and let us know if you like these, if you want to hear a specific topic. I look there at least once a week, and I think that's probably the best way just to provide that ongoing feedback. I would love it. Anyway, I think this is good.
It's working.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, so are you always looking for clients? I mean, and then how do you not get burnt out? Like, I feel like I'm just hustling all the time or...
Yeah. So I think early on when you're creating a business, you're reintroducing yourself to the world, right? So let's say you've talked to those 10 people, you've synthesized the information that you've learned. You're like, okay, this is the business, this is the solution that I'm solving, and this is the approach that I'm going to take. And now I have my business model. I think early on for almost every entrepreneur, unless you are almost doing exactly the same thing as you've done as an employee somewhere else, there's going to be a slow period in the beginning to reintroduce yourself to people in your network. And I would say, like, within those first few years, it's kind of hanging the shingle and letting people know you're open for business.
Right.
Once you start consistently delivering a quality solution or solutions to those kind of vexing problems that you're solving, there's the power of word of mouth, social proof. My encouragement for people just getting started is when you do a really solid job, or you think that you did a solid job, ask for feedback and develop some kind of super short, it could be a Google form, something that's free online, where it could be like 3 questions. What did you love about this experience? What could have improved? And if you would like to leave feedback, here's a field. And click this box here if we can have permission to feature your feedback on our website.
Sure.
Because 9 times out of 10, you do a great job. People are like, you know what, Allon, we love working with you. This is what we loved most about it. And you did quality service. It was done quickly. The cost was within reason, and you're amazing to work with, and yay, and like that's something. When you collect this through a Google form, when you have a web page, or if you already have a web page, make sure that you have a place for testimonials, and you just feature that. And even better, if you have a way to collect a headshot or something that someone's willing to share, if you can get it done audio,
Right.
Like you're in the world of sound, so that could be really cool for someone to be like, hey, this is Rhodes. Allon did my audiobook. It's amazing. Highly recommend. Boom. Like then that's something that people can hear. So, kind of think about the best way to feature it. If you're a graphic designer and you want to get feedback, turn those testimonials into some beautiful social media image, and that stuff speaks volumes because after a while, you could be on the plane talking to someone. It's like, so, Allon, what do you do? Like, I produce podcasts. Oh, cool. I've always thought about doing a podcast. Where do I find you? Oh, here's my website. And they click on it. And if there's somewhere where testimonials are on that landing page, that's the social proof of like, oh my gosh, like these people that I know, or they'll see the names of people. And that's probably 9 times out of 10 how people make decisions. If you're kind of an unknown, they're going to see what other people say about your work.
Well, that's really good advice, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems simple enough, right? But sometimes you just have to hear it.
Yeah, it's simple. It's super simple. But I think especially if you're a solopreneur and you're just getting started, there's all of the things, right? There's all of the things of running a business. So where does this fit in your to-do list? And I would say prioritize it because doing this front-end work is very foundational. And that's why we started this Minisode this way, is that it's, what's the first starting place? Well, you got to have an idea for the business, but where do you get that idea from? And it's starting with asking, and it's asking those folks. And then as you start to do good work, just collect that stuff and don't forget about it. Always kind of lift it up. And I say that, and I don't think that I've updated my testimonial page since I created my website. So, action is everything. And so now that I've done this, and especially once this goes live, I have to. Yes, I know. I know. Hold me to task, but I gotta update my own stuff. So, but that's good. That's why we do this kind of dialogue is the accountability piece. So, yeah.
Sure, that's cool.
Yeah. So, what else? You think we covered how do you have a business idea? How do you get started?
I think so.
Any other questions?
So, what about something that I just recently went through? Finding a good name for your business. Here's a can of worms right there, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that goes to the conversations you're having with people talking about their problems and then some of the solutions that you come up with. And number one, if you don't know what to call your business, and I'm in that category, though I'm about to rebrand and it's very exciting. So I'm not going to say anything about it until it's rebranded. But I started with my personal brand, which is my name, so only, you have a pretty unique name, so if you're like Allon Bealesoli, Bealesoli, I'm going to get that right. Bealesoli, that could be Bealesoli Sound or something like that. You know what I mean? Like if you lead with your name, if you're scratching for like, what's the most creative thing, that's you, and you can, and say you end up only working with musicians or you're only working with podcasters. It's broad enough that you can be nimble as you're still figuring out like that secret sauce of your business. If it's something really obvious, you've already established, I want to work with podcasters. Yeah. Then kind of lead with, pod to the people or pod, whatever the thing is. It's very clear on what it is that you're doing. There's an episode that I did on, it was Jen T. Grace's podcast. So it was, I think it's LGBT branding for professionals. And it was episode 98, if you follow that. And I was on it. And we were talking about, what do you name your business? And we talked a lot about the personal brand versus I'm the founder of Apple. It's a thing. It's something else, and it's separate from you. And there's lots of different opinions on this, but I'm of the opinion, lead with your name first if you're unknown. And it could be for me, Rhodes Perry, the Perry brand of companies or something. So you have this umbrella company, and then you could have so many different offshoots, so many different ventures, of Rhodes Perry Speaks, and then something named after your book. And, there's the Out Entrepreneur podcast, and there's all these other little things that fall under it. So it's almost like this is your broad lab, and you have these little businesses underneath it. And lots of entrepreneurs that I've had on the show, even though we've focused in on one aspect of their big brand, they have many other companies, so it's interesting, and I'm learning this as I go along, talking to different business owners of their approach. But I just, that's my kind of bias, I guess, is lead with your name and then get more specific, as opposed to, and again, I think this goes to the assumption of I'm only working with podcasters. And so like, this is the thing. You may have pigeonholed yourself a little too early in the game because you're going to learn as you go along. But the thing is about all of this is that there's no right way.
Sure.
Because you can always change. You can always test and change.
Right. I was thinking of like in my drop-down menu, like learn more. And when you go to learn more, it's like, oh, there's a lot of services that have nothing to do with podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh, let's look at this guy's music page. Know, let's check out, look, they compose this TV commercial, or that person can compose TV commercials. So kind of go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really cool too. Like if I love that, like learn more, because, sometimes there will be people looking at your kind of real estate online, so to speak. And they may have, everybody has a different perspective, right? And so they may see something in the work that you're doing that so seamlessly connects everything that it's just you're too close to it that you don't see that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that outside perspective sometimes can like give you that idea of like, this is the thing, like this is what I see in your work. And you're like, whoa, I didn't see that, so you might be surprised when you workshop, or it's not even like you're workshopping. This is the power of the internet, is that it's kind of this great democracy of you're getting instant feedback, so you put out an idea and you can see really quickly if you look at the stats of your page of like who's clicking on what and where are they going. And I would really encourage people like early on, find out, look at that traffic if you have that ability on your website. Like what's the most popular thing on your website? Because maybe it's the thing that you have not given a lot of attention to, but that's where prospective clients, customers, whoever, even just kind of general people in the public, they're going to, because they're getting some value from it. And if you see that consistently over time, there's something to that. That's a great thing. And, versus like probably 50, 100 years ago, you start a business, you don't get that instant feedback. It's like people are spending money for the thing that you're doing or they're not. And
sure.
And you're kind of like, I don't know what's working. I don't know what's not. So there's definitely power to the click of kind of engagement on websites and things of that nature that really are just instantaneous. Like, if you've got something good or you got to test and change. And
that makes sense. And it does go back to like letting the client or potential client tell you what they need. So by their interaction, they're saying, I'm really interested in this.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Some of the other things too, and this is the power of online businesses. And I would say this is for anyone. If you have a brick and mortar business, if you only do client work, there is something to packaging your knowledge. And I guess this is more if you're a knowledge worker, but something of packaging your knowledge and turning it into a webinar, a like 6-week learning series, something like that. And you don't even have to design it. You could just kind of give a little description of what the thing is, what people will learn, what they can take away. You could feature it on your website. You can put a little, here's how much it cost, click here to buy, and click it, link it up to your PayPal or however you like collect money online. And, do some marketing around that and test how you're marketing it. And immediately, if you have something that's going to meet someone's challenge and problem or not. And I think that almost is a less risky way of, even starting a business, right? It's like, I'm going to teach you the basics of getting started as a podcaster, or I'm going to teach you the basics of how to come up with a podcast name and like something that's going to deliver value to a particular audience and how you define your audience. And there's so much to it, right? That I think for people that aren't doing the podcasting right now, it's a good way of just figuring out, okay, this could be an actual service too, in addition to teaching people how to do it. So
that's a good reminder, actually, because I think that a lot of times once we learn things, we kind of take them for granted as well. So there's a reason we know these things. It's because we went through this process to get to where we are. Yeah. But other people, maybe they just, the simplest thing to us, they just aren't getting because they haven't gone through the process. So it's like, no, this is really this simple. Like you're talking about naming your podcast, like here's a little webinar about doing this particular thing. That you it's the past to you to some extent.
Yeah. And it's not easy. I'm like kind of taking myself back a couple of years ago where it's like, there's so much stuff that I want to talk about, and having this platform, there's a great responsibility. So what is something that I love talking about that I'm never going to get tired of talking about, that I can talk with other people who love talking about it, and I'm delivering value to people as well. And that's how I came up with the Out Entrepreneur. I love it.
Brilliant name, by the way.
Yeah.
Love it as well.
Yeah. And that wasn't easy either, because we were just talking about before we hit record of just how do we refer as an inclusive way to our rainbow family? And there's not a whole lot of consensus around it. So and that's fun. I mean, that's why I love doing what I do and talking with so many different members of the LGBTQ plus community.
Right. That's a good one.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I think this is cool. I'm really enjoying our Minisode kind of flow here. I hope for the audience, I hope you're enjoying this and you're patient as we are going through this the first trial run of the Minisode. So again, please let us know what you like about it, what you hope to learn. And especially, if you are a longtime listener, if there are some themes that have popped up in the past that you're like, Rhodes, you got to talk about this. Let us know. So, and I love that I have a co-host with the Minisode with Allon. So maybe we'll do some kind of photo shoot or something for the Minisodes.
Totally. Let's make a calendar.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
we'll have in different poses for all 12 months.
Oh my God. I think we've got, so let us know if you want to see the calendar of Allon and me and maybe some past guests as well, like at least in the Portland area. Cool. Well, with that, I think we're good. And I know that we've got plenty of other things to talk about. So because in the spirit of Minisode, we want to kind of keep this shorter, but who knows, maybe this is longer than we thought. But again, let us know what you think. It's always, always, always a pleasure, delivering content of value to so many of you. You know where to find us at www.outentrepreneur.com. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, you can through iTunes or any other place where you consume our great podcast content. And we want you to remember to keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.